There are many iconic images from the Vietnam War, but most serve an American-centric narrative. Discussion of the war is often focused on the morality of the United States' involvement, and if its men and women could prevail against a mythic enemy, Communist North Vietnam, and its People's Liberation Army proxies, commonly known as the Viet Cong. In the end, the Communists emerged victorious, and their perspective has also found voice in history. But there are a group of men often overlooked when telling the story of the Vietnam War. They fought to secure their own country alongside their allies, the United States of America. And when Saigon fell, their nation, their home, ceased to exist. They are the soldiers of South Vietnam. Growing up first-generation American and the child of Vietnamese refugees, the war is something you rarely hear about from your family. The loss of South Vietnam was a source of pain that people avoided talking about. For example, I have uncles on both sides of my family that served in the South Vietnamese military, but they declined to be a part of this project for various reasons. As a result, a lot of children growing up in South Vietnamese families or Vietnamese American families, children of refugees, don't know what their parents, what their grandparents, aunts, and uncles have gone through. As a U.S. Army veteran who is deployed to a combat zone, I know how important it is to talk about these experiences. These aren't just stories, these are perspectives missing from the common narrative. History is being erased as South Vietnamese veterans pass away, leaving behind only myths and misconceptions. I can't let that stand. In 2018, I was given the chance to interview 4 South Vietnamese veterans now living in Westminster, California. To really learn what happened in context, we have to start from the beginning.
At the end of French colonization in 1955, 2 countries were established. In the north, there was the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, whose single-party government was led by militant anti-French communists. In the south was the Republic of Vietnam. Now independent of French rule, the republic allied itself with the United States of America.
I was very thankful they were willing to be vulnerable and tell their stories because it's not easy. The war was obviously a traumatic experience, and there are a lot of conflicting emotions, I'm sure, from being on the losing side of it. I don't think it's easy to be on the losing side of a war. I don't think it's easy to be blamed for losing a war.
In 1959, when I was a young student, listened to a lot of news that the communists start have a guerrilla war against the Republic of Vietnam. A lot of friends of mine, they volunteered to join to the armed force. And then I figured I have to join them and then do the job as a young man for the country.
I joined the army just because look at all the peers. They join the army and you will not enjoy your own life in the back. You want to protect your country, your duty, particularly young people. So I did that.
United States Navy picked me up from Vietnam to United States for study about the naval subject. I graduated from 1971, and then after that I come back to Vietnam and to join the Vietnamese Navy to fight the communists in that time. So
my first days in South Vietnamese Army, this is the 1st of November 1960. I was in National Military Academy at Dalat and graduated as first second lieutenant. And I'm voluntary go to 31st Special Force group of Vietnamese Army.
Being a brand new republic formerly under colonial rule, the Army of South Vietnam was a collection of former French colonial troops with little command experience and no support forces worthy of mention. With the Viet Cong threat on the horizon, the ARVM relied heavily on the help of their new American allies for training to transform into a modern army of professional soldiers.
Most of the people graduate from flying school. They perform the job very excellent. And then, of course, when you fly, a lot of things happen to you during the war. You can get shut down, or you can have some mechanical failure, something like that, and then it needs the skill to make an emergency landing and to save, and not yourself, but a lot of people on your helicopter.
I was in Special Forces, in JFK, Center for training for Special Force training. They call it Special Force Officer Course. So I have almost over years, living in the United States, and I have some briefing, for the officers in the BRAC. And when I come back at the downtown, project, we have half American and half Vietnamese. When I go to operation, we live in the same time. American, and Vietnamese in the same time.
With the help of U.S. logistical advisors, leaders in Saigon managed to unite the multiple ethnic and religious groups into a modern fighting force. In addition to the growing pains of being a brand new country with limited infrastructure, the Republic of Vietnam had the additional hardship of being thrust into a war against an insurgency backed by North Vietnam and its powerful allies.
American media sensationalism and bias had the American people believing that the soldiers of South Vietnam were incompetent or unwilling to fight for their own country. But what was really going on was an understandable period of growing pains. The Vietnam War was raging for many years before American combat troops arrived and continued for 2 years after they left. Who was fighting the war if not the ARVN? One more time.
The Americans did not think much of the ARVNs, and the ones in the American units. They didn't have anything nice to say about them. Of course, they didn't work with them, so they didn't know. All they knew was what they saw and heard about.
Well, there are several myths that remain, unfortunately, still very prevalent in the historiography of the Vietnam War. I think the most common one is that the sort of typical soldier was a coward and that the senior leadership was either corrupt or incompetent. You cannot make a blanket judgment of the ARVN or the South Vietnamese military unless you understand the time, the location, the area, and a whole many other factors.
I was very fortunate to be assigned to a Ranger battalion, which was an elite fighting force, along with the Airborne and Marines. These three branches of ARVN was the best that South Vietnam had to offer.
The Republic of Vietnam veteran won the war to know exactly what happened during the War of Vietnam. The War of Vietnam is not between the North and the South, but it's between the communists and the freedom-loving people.
If the politician did something wrong, but don't blame the soldiers. Because the soldier, we ready to fight. We ready to sacrifice our life to protect the country.
And my views on Vietnamese military in Vietnam were humanitarian. So the military in Vietnam before 1975, the good military, the good people, check the people.
In a big, army like this, you see some guy, steal something from the army and you say, oh, your army is bad. No. That's a very small amount of people do it, but not the whole army. We have very good general. We have a lot of the good unit. After 72, we still fight good. We won a lot of big, battles. We have a Tet offensive. We have a Alok And after 73, we still have a lot of them.
It's important to put yourself in the boots of these men. They're fighting in rice paddies and jungles, but they were fighting in their own country. And it wasn't a civil war to them. They were fighting for the Republic of Vietnam. They were fighting for their country's sovereignty. Their country to them was a separate nation from the Democratic Republic of Vietnam up north. The war at the time could be characterized as what we now call a counterinsurgency. The Republic of Vietnam was fighting against an armed pro-communist guerrilla movement within its own borders. But North Vietnam was enabling that insurgency by bringing in equipment and fighters from across the border. And in later phases of the war, that conflict did become more conventional, fighting the North Vietnamese army.
Throughout the war, the ARVN ran a full spectrum of operations across its branches, in the air, at sea, and on land.
After I graduated and then joined the Air Force, we started learning how to fly combat mission. At that time, most of the mission we perform is medevac, supply for the troop in the area of the Third Corps of the Republic of Vietnam.
The first time I shot in the cargo ship, I carry ammunition, a bomb, and support in the South Vietnam. The Navy I shot 3 times. The first time, landing 610. That means the big cargo ship.
Okay.
And the second time, the mine sweeper.
Well, the ARVN military, the setup is based on the French. So a captain or a major would be in charge of an infantry battalion and have, say, 4 companies, theoretically 400 men, never at full strength.
The battalion was armed with old World War II and Korean surplus weapons, which they used proficiently and wisely. It was not until the latter part of the war in 1968 that they received what the Americans were armed with, such as the AR-15, the M16, the M60 machine guns, the M79 grenade launchers, and the PRC-25 radios.
Early M16s, they didn't have the forward assist of the A1. They seemed to work very well for them. We'd heard all of the rumors of M16s not working, and certainly the one I got worked very well. They had 30 caliber Browning machine guns that had been stripped to be lighter weight rather than the M60 machine guns that the Americans had, but they worked very well as far as that went. They had 60 millimeter mortars instead of 81 millimeter mortars. And they were, of course, being taught American tactics.
When I was in 31st Vietnamese Special Forces, we have 2 groups, that is 77 and 31st group. And after that, I've been assigned to Delta Project, that they call Project Delta Special Forces. And this unit, and later, with the 81st Airborne Ranger Battalion, and we built up, the 81st Airborne Ranger Group. Most powerful of our mission is we operate, operation behind enemy line. And it has varying mission, like ambush, capture, genre, check bomb damage, show, for the B-52, the target, and lead some big unit to exploit target after the bomb.
Most of the time, our mission is evacuate the injury and resupply for the outpost or the district or something like that. Most of the time, the district or the outpost is not very secure. The communists always surrounded them, and they wait for the supply, helicopter supply, something coming, and they try to shoot it out. So with the procedure, you fly helicopter, you cannot make approach like you approach in the airport. You have to maneuver I remember in 1965, I landed at Dong Sai district, and I carry about 9 injured soldiers with the crew of about 3 people, 2 pilots and 1 cruise ship. And when I land and I take off, I got shot 32 rounds, hit my helicopter, but none hit anybody, just hit the helicopter. But we're lucky, we come back to the safe area we land. A lot of things, it's really dangerous. But when you perform the mission, you don't think of the danger that you try to perform the best you can and save yourself and the rest of the people.